A new era in Bangladesh after protests oust Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and force her to flee the country. The military says it's now in charge whilst an interim government is put in place. So is Bangladesh on a path to stability or further turmoil? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. After 20 years in power, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has resigned and fled Bangladesh amid widespread protests. Her government's violent crackdown on dissent killed several hundred people and fuelled public anger. What began as student demonstrations against job quotas quickly escalated, needed to dissolution of parliament and release of opposition leaders. The military has stepped in, saying it will set up an interim government, but protesters are warning they don't want it to rule. As Bangladesh enters uncharted territory, many are asking who will lead the nation now and how can stability be restored without compromising demands for greater democracy. We'll discuss all of this with our guests shortly, but first this report from Axel Zaimovic.
After weeks of protests and violence, celebrations in Dhaka. The head of the Bangladeshi army confirmed Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's resignation and the dissolution of parliament.
We have decided to form an interim government which will now run the country. We are now going to meet the Honourable President and will discuss its formation.
Student-led protests were first triggered in July by a quota system earmarking sought-after government jobs for specific groups, including the relatives of veterans of Bangladesh's 1971 War of Independence from Pakistan. Hundreds of people were killed in a crackdown in the following weeks. Forced to flee, Hasina's departure ended her second stint in power, lasting 15 years. Although she oversaw a period of strong economic growth, it was marred by accusations of corruption and her being seen as an incredibly hardline leader. Many people in Bangladesh now want an end to the violence and turmoil.
I expect the new government will run the country with honesty, therefore the people can live and sleep in peace.
We need peace, that's it. We are poor, working-class people who are daily wage earners. We just want to live in peace.
Longtime rival to Sheikh Hasina, former Prime Minister and opposition leader Khaleda has been released after years under house arrest. And the leaders of the student protests are demanding Bangladeshi economist and Nobel laureate Mohammed Yunus to be the chief advisor to any interim government. With the army now in power, it's promising to form what is called a caretaker government. And General Wakar-uz-Zaman has called for the unrest to end, something many in Bangladesh want to see. Axel Zaimovic, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, let's bring in our guests now. And in the capital, Dhaka, Shireen Huq is a human rights activist and founding member of the women's rights organisation Naripokkho. In London, barrister Najib Rahman is a member of the Islamic political party Bangladesh Jemaat-e-Islami. That was banned by Sheikh Hasina. Najib's father led that party and was executed in 2016 after being convicted in a war crimes trial that was internationally criticised. Also in Dhaka, we have Nadine Shanta Mashid, Associate Professor of Social Work at the University of Buffalo in New York, who focuses on Bangladesh. A very warm welcome to all of you. It has been an extraordinary few days there in Bangladesh. I'd like to start by getting some of your thoughts on these historic events. Shireen, first of all, your feelings on the exit of Hasina and the power of the protesters.
In one word, I feel ecstatic. It was long overdue. And I want to say bravo to the young people whose steadfastness, whose commitment, and whose dedication brought this about. I also want to take this opportunity to express my deep sense of loss at the loss of so many young lives. This was unnecessary, and this was the obstinacy of Sheikh Hasina, which led to the loss of these lives.
Nadine, you are there in Dhaka at the moment. You are a professor in New York. I mean, what a time to be back in Bangladesh. This is something that you'll be talking about with your students for many years to come, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And my response is, similar, but, there's been so much destruction. There's so much violence on the streets right now, and of course, in the last 2 weeks, I've been telling friends, I am living about like 2 years in 2 weeks, and so much has happened. And it's not just the July massacre that we've been talking about. Now we're in August, which had seen a different kind of massacre in the past. And here we are, looking at something very different, but also still very difficult in terms of just uncertainty, as we don't know what is coming. And so, in terms of the PM and what I wish she had not left the nation in this pile of destruction. I think the people needed to hear from her. They wanted an apology, and an apology that never came. And perhaps a little bit about apologies and how, political psychologists would suggest that, it makes people more upset. And we know that sometimes, right? It does. But then it creates space for reconciliation. And so I'm imagining that that is something that the students had wanted. They wanted to find a way to reconcile their differences with the state, having been betrayed on multiple levels, from being held back from economic opportunities to being killed. And so I think the timing of the demand for an apology a couple of weeks ago was interesting too. It's when the former PM had invoked the Rajakar/traitor, that the students used a liberation war trope of their own, which is the apology. And, as you know, that this of people still waiting for an apology from Pakistan for atrocities in 1971.
Okay,
and
I just want to throw that back to Shireen, because it's a very interesting point that you raised, perhaps one that not many people were expecting, that you don't think Hasina should have left the country, that she should have stayed and overseen reconciliation by giving an apology for the chaos, for the deaths of hundreds of students. Shireen, do you agree with that?
No, I don't actually. I think the time for that was over. The game was over. The time for an apology was at least 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. It was too late. She had to go, but that does not mean she will not be brought to justice. The country demands, the students demand, the people demand, and you know that the student protests actually eventually turned into a people's movement. And so it was really ordinary people joining in with support of the students, which brought about the final downfall. And they want justice. They want clearly, and they've articulated very clearly, they want justice. She has to be tried for her crimes.
How does that happen, Shireen, given that she is now in India, potentially going to the UK? I mean, she's not going to be returning anytime soon.
From what we've heard, the UK has refused asylum, but I don't know the latest news. But there has to be some kind of extradition process. Otherwise, we have to go to the International Criminal Court.
OK, that's obviously down the line. Najib, let's bring in you now, because you're obviously there in London. You're watching from exile from Bangladesh, as you're a member of a banned Islamic political party. What are your feelings now that the political stage in Bangladesh has been thrown wide open?
Yeah, first of all, you said banned party. It's not a banned party. It was banned by an illegitimate government, and that was their last effort to divert the situation. But they didn't succeed. Even after Hasina's fall, when parties were called to Bango Bhavan, the residence of president, our party chief were called. So I don't agree with you that Jamaat is actually banned. Second of all, yes, the emotion is quite mixed. On one hand, I'm quite overwhelmed because finally a fascist regime is gone. On the other hand, we lost so many lives. I mean, in recent time, in my calculation, more than 500 people died, and most of them are young. And throughout 15 years, we lost so many lives. So many people are still missing. Following my father's execution, which was actually criticized by everybody, it was not just. It was not justice. It was a judicial killing. I had to flee the country following the abduction of my colleague. It was exactly 8 years ago in August 2016, 9th of August precisely. And my colleague Mir Ahmed bin Qasim was abducted, and I was dragged by my brother to the airport, and I left without anything. And today, when I talked to Mir Ahmed bin Qasim, who was just released, I barely recognize him. He lost half of his weight. His whole complexion has been changed. He had two daughters, aged 3 and 6, I believe. Now they are teenagers. I mean, how their days passed in last few years, it's you can imagine. So finally it's over, but not over yet. We need a stabilized country. We need law and order situation to back, and also restoration of democracy. So we have a long way to go.
And at the moment, what we have, Nadine, is the military in control, the army chief saying it is in power. It will oversee the formation of an interim government. Is that acceptable to the student protesters, to the people of Bangladesh?
Well, our history with the military in Bangladesh is violent and problematic, and most importantly, undemocratic. And students have rejected martial law. That's not something that they want. And so, no, I don't think, if that's the way we're headed, that's going to work. But the interim government is perhaps where there is hope. And that's where we have to see that, we get representatives that are good for the nation. I think if we reproduce the problems we've seen in the past and put similar kinds of people in power, we're going to see the same kinds of problems. So students have made clear that no old guards, no old gatekeepers, no old systems, right? So I'd like to see what that looks like.
Yeah, how difficult is it to create these new systems, especially when Hasina has just spent 15 years dismantling civil society, dismantling independent judiciary and the free press?
Well, it will take time. It will take time. But I think the students have shown that there is a way in which this can happen. The students have shown how to work together collectively. They've shown us what shared leadership might look like. They have 6 people on top. And also that's not a democratically elected group. And so they perhaps also have to democratize themselves. But I think it starts with democracy from within, from within parties, from within systems, and go from there. This will be hard, but it will. But I think the students have shown that it can be done. Like I said, 2 years, weeks, so maybe more of that.
Okay, Shireen, we've got Mohammed Yunus. His name is being thrown around as the students' preferred option to head the interim government. He's, of course, a Nobel laureate. He pioneered microfinance there in Bangladesh. But just give us an idea of why he has been put forward as the person to lead Bangladesh through these troubled times.
He's probably the most respected and most acceptable citizen, senior citizen in the country right now. And that is probably why his name has been put forward. And I'm glad to hear that he has agreed tentatively, and he will be suggesting an interim cabinet soon. Maybe not tonight, but probably tomorrow. And I think, being a man of integrity, he will provide the nation the kind of guidance it needs at this point. As Nadine has also mentioned, we have disturbing news right now of arson and loot and attacks on people, and especially on religious minorities, on temples, on their businesses, on their houses. And so this is something that we had expected the army, when it said it's in control, to take care of this situation. And the army has failed. It seems to me that the army has failed miserably in that. And so we hope the sooner we get the interim government, the better, the more chances that there will be peace and this mayhem will stop.
Who else needs to be part of that interim government, Shireen? If I could just jump in there, because a lot of women, a lot of girls, female students were part of these protests. Will they be represented in positions of power as we move forward in Bangladesh?
I would hope that not only the girls, but also the young boys who participated in the struggle, that there will be a representation of the young people who actually led the struggle, who succeeded in getting rid of Hasina. And we make space for them, make space for the young people. That's my belief.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what will happen, but let us hope that we will see the good representation of young people.
Najib,
men and women.
of course, Jemaat-e-Islami will be looking to be part of this process, looking to get back into some form of power. Does the party appreciate Mohammed Yunus as the man to lead the nation at this time?
Yes, our party chief actually made a statement that we need some sort of national unity. And I believe Mohammed Yunus, he is in a right place to unite the country because he is accepted across the board. But I mean, the goal is to restore the democracy and the process. So it will not be easy, whoever comes to the power. I don't support army at all, not my party, as I understood, because, as mentioned, the history of army in Bangladesh, it's not that good. On top of that, there are allegations that they took part in atrocities, in recent, not only recent atrocities, but their members. They were part of RAB, Rapid Action Battalion, who is infamous for their extrajudicial killing. So they are in back foot to regain their confidence. Also, they have to prove themselves before UN because there are allegations that UN vehicles were used, UN helicopters were used to kill innocent people. So, yes, there should be some sort of interim government. And their aim will be to restore democracy. I mean, there are institutions that needs to be reconstituted. Election Commission, judiciary, police, those are heavily politicized over the period. And they were effectively become crippled. So to arrange a credible election, those institutions are needed to be reconstituted with people who will have trust on.
Okay.
So,
Shireen,
yes,
Shireen, if I could just bring Shireen back in at that point, just to get an idea from her, just quickly, as to how quickly elections could take place or need to take place.
The Constitution, 3 months. But I think what is the most important is not just the holding of the elections and making sure they're free and fair, but there has to be a process of reform. It's not about just restoring the judiciary as it was, restoring the government as it was. It's about reforms. That is what the students have said all along, and that is what a lot of people are saying as well. So the reforms have to be in place in order for a good democratic outcome. Otherwise, we are going to have an elected government without democracy.
Nadine, what do you think about a 3-month timeline? Can all those reforms be in place? There's an awful lot to do in a short period of time. Is it better that the interim government has the breathing space, has the time to get Bangladesh back on a surer footing before holding a general poll?
I think there should be room for discussion about that and have everybody weigh in on progress and make decisions as they come, because it's hard to know how things are going to go from this moment onwards, right? But I think what's important is to democratize the political parties, Awami League and BNP and Jamaat and Jatiya Party and any others, maybe even Junaid Saki and his Gano Shanghati. These are all political parties that need to regroup, find themselves, democratize their own institutions, and then be ready for electability. I think that has to happen. We don't want the same system of having one person represent a political party for the rest of their lives. And it is only when they depart that we can find a new leader, and maybe not even then. So I think that's the system we need to get rid of, this royal family system, if you will.
Najib,
and that
looking at this timeline going forward in Bangladesh, do you see a point when you can return to your country?
I want to return right now, but you can't do that because I'm settled now in UK. I'm here for the last 8 years, but I will return as soon as possible. Adding to to my co-participants' points. So timeline, I think that is not practical at that moment. However, stresses can be in place to have participations, discussion, engaging with all stakeholders, including political parties, civil societies, to have some sort of unity. And democracy cannot function without dialogue. So we didn't have that in last a couple of decades. So we need to start that and coming to an agreement how democracy should function and how the other institutions like judiciary, as pointed out, even army, there are allegations of politicizing army as well. So how those institutions be made functional and healthier for a democratic society.
Shireen, if we move to look at the state of politics within Bangladesh, obviously Hasina has been in power for 15 years. The opposition has not been in power for quite a long time. Hasina's nemesis, Khaleda Zia, she was released, one of the political prisoners to be released today, but she is in very poor health and she heads up the BNP, that is the other leading party in Bangladesh. What is the state of the BNP? Is it in any state to lead the country?
I think the BNP lost its credibility long ago. And the slogan on the street today is that we did not get rid of Hasina in order to get BNP. We want an alternative. And I think that alternative is something that the interim government has to somehow facilitate. And whether that will be a national government or what kind of government, I'm not sure yet, but something that is more representative of all different stakeholders.
Nadine,
and
you
I just want to mention one thing. I wanted to mention one more thing, that in fact, today, one of the issues I went along with the other activists who are working on enforced disappearances to the DGFI office, which is where a lot of people have been held up. And 2 people were found released early this morning. And we wanted to find out where the others are. But we've been told that they have no knowledge about having custody of such people, but they have promised to give us information tomorrow. So these are all issues that are coming up as well. So it's not just what has happened in the last 1 month, but what has happened over the last 15 years. And the number of enforced disappearances is very high. And so this is something that I just wanted to bring up as an example of all the other issues that are going to come up on the table.
Nadine, you said in the beginning that you wished Hasina had remained in Bangladesh to be held accountable for the deaths of the protesters recently, for the enforced disappearances, for the state that she's left the country in. How do you think Bangladesh can reconcile with the past couple of decades? How can they move forward and find justice for the crimes that have been committed?
Well, like I said, my wish was that she would remain in Bangladesh and stand trial, right? And that would have been the best case scenario, in my opinion, because that would allow the people to face her, and it would allow her to face the people and perhaps be in that reconciliatory space where you can have dialogue, perhaps in a courtroom. But that's not going to happen. And so, as Shireen Huq said before, maybe, it'll have to happen through other methods, but I'm not sure how that's actually going to work, and so I don't know if that will happen, and I don't know how. I don't know. That's a hard one. I think once she leaves, things change, and there are other laws that come into play, and there are systems that are different, and it depends on where she goes and how those systems work. So I think things get quickly out of our control as people leave the nation. And we know this from the killers of Sheikh Mujib to everybody else, right?
Well, perhaps that question would have been better put to Najib, who, of course, has first-hand experience with the execution of his father in 2016 under Sheikh Hasina's rule. Are you seeking retribution for that?
Yeah, we are aggrieved, but as our party chief, Dr. Shafiqur Rahman, asked that we are not for revenge. Personally, as you mentioned, I'm aggrieved for many reasons. I lost my dad. I was kicked out from my homeland, and I'm in exile for the last 8 years. I lost my colleagues, so many people, but I'm not for revenge. I don't believe revenge will do any sort of reconciliation. Justice needs to be done, but not revenge, not even through judiciary. So when we say justice, first of all, people needs to know what happened, who are the perpetrators. And then after that, there might be some sort of reconciliation between parties. That happened in South Africa in so many places. I mean, last 15 years, so many people lost so many things, beloved one, to start with. Not only that, I mean, not only lives are lost, even properties were lost. I mean, we saw the way people took revenges, and violence erupted. I can stress that violence is not a way. As soon as possible, law and order situation should be restored, and then the perpetrators, they should be brought to the justice. And talking about Sheikh Hasina, even if she fled outside the country in India or USA or UK, wherever she goes,
sure. Okay, Shireen, just the last minute that we have, I just want to get a final thought from you, because the events have been celebrated as Bangladesh's second independence. But is the country now in for a rocky ride?
I think we are in for a rocky ride. There's no doubt about that. But that was true from our first independence as well. People are saying on the streets, this is our second independence. They feel after 15 years, they've got rid of a tyrant. So that is independence. But there is definitely a rocky ride. Nothing is going to be smooth. And we have to be prepared to fight this process through till the end.
OK, and we'll be watching every step of the way. Many thanks indeed for a great discussion today. Shireen Huq, Najib Rahman and Nadine Shanta Mashid. And thank you too for watching. You can see this programme again anytime by visiting our website. That's aljazeera.com. For further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Laura Kyle, and the whole team here, it's bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.